Hey everyone, it's Kathleen from Kathleen Marie Design and Online Art with Kathleen. In today's lesson, we will be making an abstract artwork that is consisting of a variety of lines. And by creating these lines, we will create different sections and shapes that we will then paint with watercolor paint. The lines are created with oil pastels. So for this lesson, we will need oil pastels, watercolor paint, a large piece of paper, a paintbrush, a cup of water, and a paper towel. I also will be showing some examples of lines that you can use, and my paper that I'm using for that can be found if you Google on Pinterest. So let's begin. As I mentioned, we are going to be using a variety of lines. I typed in different lines and I was taken to Pinterest and I found this example that's not my own. And what I liked about this, it's typically in color, and when I'm using it with my students, since they are not able to all read the words, they are able to identify the lines by the color or the way the line is drawn. So I use this when I'm teaching this lesson with my students. So we are going to be keeping this in mind as I draw the lines. In this lesson, we will also be talking about direction. So we will be talking about lines that are horizontal or going left to right, lines that are vertical or going up and down, and lines that are going diagonally. Each time I draw a new line, I'm going to choose a new color of oil pastel. So if you have a variety of oil pastel colors, that's great. If you do not have oil pastels, you can still do the same lesson with crayons, a Sharpie, or a pencil. I do not recommend using any type of washable marker because we will be painting and that will smear. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a color and a direction. So I can pick horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. To make it easy, I am going to do horizontal. And each time I do a new line, I'm either going to go from one edge to another, or I'm going to go from an edge to a line or a line to a line. You'll see that more as we go. So I'm going to start edge to edge horizontally with a simple wavy line. Each time I do a new line, I'm going to choose a new color of oil pastel and a new direction. In my second line, I am going to do a zigzag line, but since I have separated my paper in half, I can no longer pass it because the rules of this lesson are whenever I touch a line, I stop. So I'm going to do a vertical zigzag line, starting at the top edge, but when I get to this line, I'm going to stop. What we're doing with these lines is we are starting to break our paper down into smaller sections or shapes. So only by creating two lines, I now have 3 sections. New line, new color. I'm going to do a diagonal line from the bottom edge to this line. Now I'm noticing oil pastels, you might notice as well, are messy. They're messier than a crayon or marker. I got a little bit on my finger and now I've created a few blue fingerprints on my page, which is okay. It will get covered up with paint, but that's something to keep in mind. So make sure you're not leaning your arm over your lines as you're working because it can definitely smear. New line, new color, and a new direction. So I have all 3 directions now. Now I'm going to continue to break my paper up into smaller sections. So I'm going to do another horizontal one starting at this edge. I'm going to do a loop-de-loop line. This line is a little bit trickier. All right, I'll do new line, new color. I like to call, let's see. I'm going to do this one on my paper. It's called a castle line. Now, these are only a few examples of lines that you can choose from. There's many more, but this is just a combination of a straight line and a shape, and you can do this with anything. You see it again in mouse ears. You could do it with a triangle instead of a square, whatever you want. So I'll do that horizontally again, and it'll be nice and big. So goes over, up, over, down. Okay, so each time I draw my new lines, I am separating my paper into smaller shapes. There's two different categories of shapes, organic and geometric shapes. Geometric shapes are shapes like a square, circle, triangle. They have a name. And organic shapes are wiggly, squiggly shapes that don't have a name, and they're more free form, free flowing. So we're making lots of different organic shapes. I'm gonna do a dotted line. Dotted line is just like it sounds. It's made up of dots. Okay. Each time, since I have a lot of colors in my set, I am trying to use a different color. I only have one diagonal line, so let me do another diagonal. Something easy. Straight line. I could even do a few. By adding a few straight lines, I'll have 1, 2, 3. Now 3 different sections I can paint in. I'm going to do a line that's a little bit trickier, and I'm going to make it trickier yet because I'm going to do it vertically instead of horizontally. But I like to call this one kind of like a shark wave line. Now the examples I was saying is usually we're going from an edge and stopping at a line, but sometimes, like in this example, this went from a line to a line. I'm looking around for shapes that are still pretty big and need to be broken up. So they're getting smaller up here, but I have 2 large shapes down here. So what direction line would break those in half? Vertical, diagonal, or horizontal? It would all break it in half, but to break it into a smaller even section, I think I should do a vertical or diagonal line. I'll do one of each. I'm going to do a dash line diagonally, dash, dash, just little straight lines. And I will do, let's find a color I haven't used yet. I'll use that one. I don't have red yet. I'm gonna do, which line don't I have? Sometimes we run out of lines. I'm gonna do a zigzag, but make it smaller, like a tinier little zigzag. Okay, by adding these 2 lines, now I have 2 smaller sections. Something fun that you could add somewhere, let's see if I have space, kind of up here, would be a rainbow line. So if you have all of the colors of the rainbow in your oil pastel, that's a fun way that we can create shapes that we can paint in. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Okay, so that's something I could paint in each section. Let's look for the big ones. This one's pretty long, so maybe I'll cut it in half with a vertical line. I'm gonna do straight line, triangle, straight line, triangle. Okay, that's a tiny one, but now I've created 2 different sections. At a certain point, you might realize or decide that you have enough sections and you're ready to stop. When you decide to stop is really up to you. I'm gonna do this one. Straight line, kind of semicircle or semi-oval. Okay, I think that's a good amount of sections, and now I'm ready to start painting. So I have my set of Faber-Castell watercolor paints, which I really like. They're nice and opaque. And when I paint, I'm going to make sure that I'm choosing colors that are different than my lines. So we have 3 lines usually to look out for. So let's see. I have a dark blue, a light blue, and a purple. So I don't want to choose any of those colors. I'm going to choose yellow. and I'm going to paint in this section. Now, depending on how complicated your lines are, it might be a little tricky to paint, because this kind of shark wave line is a little tricky to draw, which means it's going to be a little tricky to paint. Take your time. It will take time to fill all of this in, but just like any art project, you don't have to do it all in one sitting. You can come back later if you need to take a break. So by drawing those 3 lines, I now created this fun and funky organic shape that I was able to paint. Let's pick another one. This section only has 2 lines because it's on the edge. So we have our loop-de-loop and dash, pink and tan. So I don't want to choose either of those, so I'll choose a blue. So I have to paint kind of the same shape on the bottom and then fill it in. I'm just going to go right next to my dash line. Now the loop-de-loop, because it swirls around itself, it actually creates its own shape, like an upside down raindrop. So I'm going to paint those all a different color. The color of the line is orange, the color of the line is pink. So I'm gonna do the inside orange. You could do them all the same, or you could do them different. They're all their own shape. It's up to you. Okay, let's see. Orange, blue, or yellow. I don't want to do any of those. So why don't I do purple. So we have to curve around our lines. What's nice about oil pastel, since it is so thick and a little bit more oily than a crayon, it does block the paint. So if you get a little bit on, like I just kind of did, it will rub off. If you're doing it with a crayon, sometimes the watercolor paint can just paint right on top of it and you won't see the crayon anymore. And if you do it with a marker that's not washable and you're touching it with wet watercolor paint, your marker will smear. So if you like to use a marker instead of oil pastels, you need to make sure that it is waterproof. The last thing I'll paint is I'm going to paint my rainbow. So I'll start with the red. And I'll do each section. Orange. Now, when your paint colors are right next to each other, you do want to make sure that they're not super wet with a puddle, because the colors will smear into each other. So I accidentally smeared it. So what I can do, I'm going to wash my brush, dry my brush. With a nice dry brush, I can soak up the little bit of orange that went into my red section. So try to make sure you don't have any puddles, and that will stop your paint from smearing. And if you definitely don't want it to smear, what you can do is you can skip every other color and then go back when it's dry. So you could leave some white spots, and when the colors are dry, then you would go back and do the other. So I'm just going to try to make it not too wet so that I can do it all at once. Green. Blue. Now, a lot of times when we're doing a rainbow, indigo gets left out because it's kind of a tricky color. Not everyone remembers what indigo looks like. So indigo is a color very similar to blue and purple. It's kind of a little bit in between both of those. So our rainbow goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet or purple. Okay, let me soak up a little bit of that purple puddle with a dry paintbrush. Now, what you'll do is you'll continue on until each section is painted in, like my final example. So you can see it looks different than the one I did because each time we do this art lesson, it comes out a little bit differently, depending on which lines you choose. For this one, I started with a diagonal wavy line instead of a vertical. So that created more of a left-right separation instead of up and down. Once you have painted every one of your organic shapes, you're all done. I would love to see it. Like always, please send me your finished work, and I hope you enjoy this lesson. I'll see you next time.